Hey guys, this is Rachel from Everybody Has Stuff, joining you for another episode. And today I really wanted to talk about the show Euphoria on HBO. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this or not, but I'm just blown away by it, and I wanted to kind of share some personal feedback. So stick around. All right. So again, I'm Rachel, the host for Everybody Has Stuff, and today I thought it would be interesting to shed some light on this show. I have only started it like today, but it inspired me to have this episode where I kind of share some, I guess, I don't know, personal feelings about it because I was blown away kind of just by the pilot alone and how well the main character, Rue is her name, kind of depicts addiction and really perfectly states how it can feel for someone who's struggling with addiction, especially when they're first starting out. And I think it's incredible that this comes from a point of view of teenagers, right? Of people in adolescence, because many of us, maybe not all, but many of us started our addiction, I for one, when I was an adolescent. Around 12, eighth grade was when I had my first drink. It was wine mixed with soda, some soda that I had laying around at my parents' house, and whatever wine they had in the fridge, which they were not drinkers. So this wine had been sitting there for I don't even know. So I don't even know if that wine was even good, to be honest. Um, but I was so afraid of not liking the taste of it that I had to mix it with soda. I still didn't like it, hated the taste of it, but I guzzled that stuff down because I was headed out to the eighth grade dance. Everybody said that they would be drinking. I wanted to be a part of. And it wasn't until, even though alcohol wouldn't is not something I would say is my substance of choice, but that was my first experience of feeling like a numbness, like a calmness, even like release, and outside of myself and outside of my head. So this continued and I progressed to pot, like most teenagers do. And the only difference was is that my friends were doing it recreationally, right? They were doing it on the weekends, maybe some nights like here and there, but they could go on with their lives and didn't get stuck in this loop of the addicted brain obsessing over this substance. Meanwhile, I am doing whatever I can to scrounge up money or to find friends who had weed to convince them to share with me, just so that I could get that moment of escape, that moment of calmness, the moment of stillness that I had so longed for. Now, you might wonder, well, at 13, right? Like, what are you escaping? What could you possibly have going on in your life that you're trying to get away from, right? It just, you wouldn't think that a 13-year-old has reason to not want to feel or be in reality. But for me, I've shared my childhood was complicated, to say the least, and the trauma that I had experienced growing up had truly impacted me in ways that I couldn't understand at that age. And even now as an adult, I still don't fully understand all it has done. But thankfully, I am learning and continuing to learn and heal from that. Um, I At 13, like when you're in it, even at 13, it feels so, it is real. I'm not going to say it wasn't real because it was real to me. My perception of everything, of the world, of people, of my life was very, very real and very dark and dreary. And there's a lot of hopelessness, helplessness. There was a lot of shame and guilt, and there was a lot of resentment and anger. Um, and I wasn't really ever taught how to regulate emotions because, I didn't grow up in an environment where people knew how to regulate where like the adults didn't know how to regulate their own emotions. Therefore, I never learned how to regulate my emotions. Um, and drinking marijuana at that age felt like it helped me to regulate myself. I mean, honestly, it cut off all emotion and silenced everything, but that to me was like heaven because I was living in an environment where it was so overwhelming. I felt I was living in a body that was overwhelmed. I didn't understand why or with what or how, I just was, and my brain just would not ever shut up. And those are the times where I was using that helped my brain to stop, helped everything to just time stood still. And for once, I could just breathe and be content. Very short period of time, but this is where for me my addiction started. And I think Euphoria does a really good job of kind of depicting this in a way that is pretty realistic. Now, I've seen movies, I've seen shows in abundance on addiction, and or they've had people who struggled with addiction on these shows or movies, and some of it's pretty accurate, but I'd say so far, at least from what I've seen in this show, it's, like, on point. So, real quick, um, I just wanted to show for whoever's watching this on YouTube or, let listeners hear the scene that really 2 scenes, they're pretty short, just to give an example of what I mean. So let me share my screen here. Okay, so this is when Rue is talking about her first time getting high. Okay, so.
And I know it all may seem sad, but guess what? I didn't build this system, nor did I fuck it up. Chill. They've been waiting for me. The fuck. Feel the morning on my face. Ain't a pill that I didn't take. Just and then it happens. That moment when your breath starts to slow. I'm asleep when and every time you breathe out all the oxygen you have. And everything stops. Your heart, your lungs, and finally your brain. And everything you feel and wish and want to forget, it all just sinks. And then suddenly, you give it air again, give it life again. I remember the first time it happened to me, I got so scared I wanted to call 911, go to the hospital and be kept alive with machines and apple juice. But I didn't want to look like an idiot. I didn't want to fuck up everyone's night. And then over time, that's all I wanted. Those 2 seconds of nothingness.
So hopefully you guys could see that and hear that, but this is the first scene in which the main character is at this party where they show her at a party. And It's just really deep. Um, for those who can't see it because you're listening to the podcast through, audio only, it depicts her going through someone's house party, using cocaine. I'm assuming that it's cocaine, and drinking and, partying into oblivion, basically. And for those who struggle with addiction, I know you know exactly what I mean by that. Um, for those who don't struggle with addiction necessarily and are here to just learn about it, or you have like a loved one or a family member who struggles, I hope that kind of gave a little bit of insight. Again, this might not speak to everyone's experience, but I know personally for me, it definitely is. And I know from being in meetings and in the rooms and group therapy and all these other things with other people struggling with addiction, there's a lot of reports of similar feelings as this for why people become addicted. So I don't know, I guess maybe if it was any other day, I might not have been as impacted, but for whatever reason, when I saw this today, it really like hit home and I guess felt good to hear someone verbalize what I always had tried to tell my family, even as a teenager, what I've tried to explain to my friends who don't struggle with addiction, and just kind of what I try to explain to myself, even, it's like you try to make sense of it, you try to intellectualize it, I guess, and it's still never, you can't even find the words to express yourself to yourself, not even just to others. So I don't know if anybody else can relate to that or not, but I think what she said was so important about in that moment, everything just shuts down and it's like time just slows and everything else is going by fast around you, but it's just you in that moment, grounded and but like numb at the same time, and your mind is still, and it's just like, euphoria, like the show, like the title. It's just uh, the most amazing feeling you'll ever feel when you're someone who struggles with addiction. There's one more scene that I also wanted to play really quickly. This is where she is at another party. Um, as you know, adolescents go to parties a lot. She's with her friend who is also her drug dealer. And in this scene, she's kind of explaining, I guess, even before that actual like intentional drug use happened, how the addiction was triggered. And during a time where traumatic things were happening in her life and how it made her feel. And again, it's like so relatable. So I'm just going to play that really quickly.
Nah, I don't know what type of fucked up shit you got going inside your head. I don't know how to help, but I could tell you one thing. This drug shit, it's not the answer. I remember when I was 11 years old. It was a couple months after my dad got diagnosed, and we got the results back from the prognosis, and it was really good. It was like 80-20, and we decided to celebrate, so we ordered a bunch of Chinese food. I remember that night I was laying between my parents in bed, and all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. It was like there was no more air left in the world, and I was gasping and I was panicking. And they called the ambulance and they thought it was like, and I allergic reaction or some shit. And then when I got to the hospital, they gave me liquid Valium. Yeah, to calm me down. When it hit me, I thought, this is it. This is the feeling I've been searching for my entire life, for as long as I can remember, because suddenly the world went quiet and I felt safe in my own head. Two years later, he was gone. Panic attacks stayed. And I found a way to live, so will it eventually kill me? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. You still gonna be my dealer, Finn?
You a fucking trip, bro. I'm too high to be having this conversation right now.
Yeah, man.
So I thought that scene was pretty deep. And it was like she took the words right out of my mouth. And through the show, I've kind of tried to explain my experiences and of my own addiction and those I've seen struggle with addiction, and like whether it was me being the client or me working in the field and dealing with clients. But this just really summed everything up. And this is only the beginning. This is the first episode. So I can't wait to see what else is in store in this show. And I quickly, before I forget to mention this, I kind of want to put a warning out there to those who are in recovery or are trying to recover. This might not be the show for you. I think no matter how far away we have from a drug or a drink, we think that we can handle certain things until it's in front of us, even if it's on the TV, because it can stir up some real stuff for us and emotions. And just seeing the substances sometimes can trigger us, and seeing people using them and going through the rituals of using them, including going through every step to buy the substance and then actually using the substance, it can all be a trigger. So I'm not saying the show is to blame if anybody goes out and relapses. However, it's just to know your own personal like limit, I guess, and where like that line needs to be drawn where you get pushed over the edge. So please just be aware that this could be a triggering show. And yeah, so anyways, back to the clip. Well, first of all, what blew my mind is that she stated that they gave her liquid Valium, I believe, at such a young age. And that makes me think of another show, Dope Sick. I think that's on Showtime, which is an amazing show as well, on like the opiate epidemic and the pharmaceutical company that was really mainly in charge of pushing OxyContin, and it's insane. So watch that show as well. I swear I'm not like running ads for them, but it's just, I think it's really powerful in a different way. So, but that amazes me that even for a child, they're giving liquid Valium. Now, you say, well, not every child would have that type of reaction that Rue did, right? Of course not. Not every child would feel the liquid Valium and enjoy that and want more of it. Sometimes, you would think that they might be more scared of feeling out of control, or maybe it does nothing and they think nothing and it just puts them to sleep, right? Or relaxes them. But for someone with who struggles with addiction, we have, there's research to back this up, that there is some genetic component or some epigenetics, genetics, DNA mixed with environmental experiences that predispose somebody to possibly becoming someone who struggles with addiction. And that was the case for Rue. Obviously, I haven't gotten into all the backstory yet because I'm still so early on, but I would imagine there's something else there that's missing in that story. But it's not the same. It wouldn't be the same for every child. So just find it interesting and just kind of amazing that they started off at this point. One, you're shooting, like you're doing this show on adolescents struggling with addiction and not adults. So that to me is quite interesting. And then also you're showing someone from a young age how they can like start that cycle, how it can perpetuate itself and like snowball even from a young age without, parents knowing why, without doctors even realizing it, right? Though I believe that, the doctors probably could have given her something that was like a little less than the Valium. I'm not going to lie. I think, that's crazy, but it happens, right? In real life, people experience doctors pushing these really strong, crazy like medications that are addictive. So, but it was a little surprising to hear that they would do that for a child. And then you add the predisposition to it. It's like the perfect storm. Perfect storm. And that's kind of like how I experienced it too. At 12 when I first had that drink, and then 13 when I started smoking weed. It's just the perfect timing for that addiction to start brewing and leading me to, obviously harder substances than just drinking and marijuana. Not that those can't be addictive, obviously, or dangerous in certain ways. But yeah, so what I liked about this last clip too is that Rue talks about she found a way to live. And I think that, again, it's a perfect way to explain it, because we as addicts kind of struggle with functioning. And for whatever reason, we have a smaller threshold, a lower threshold of pain, a lower threshold of emotional pain, and a lower frustration tolerance. So the majority of us tend to feel overwhelmed more easily and more quickly than those who don't have those struggles. And so this is a perfect depiction of someone at a young age who might have already been someone that struggled with distress tolerance, and feeling that drug go through her body. In that moment, she realized she could function this way. And she states that in this scene, and she found a way to live. Like after her father died, that was the way that she kept going forward. That was the one thing she used to cope, to help deal with the emotional pain and distress, trauma, all of it. And I think that's true for a lot of us who struggle with addiction. I know for myself, I used to think that when I was high, that was my true self. I used to think that was normal. I thought that was how everybody else felt and functioned just without the substances. But for whatever reason, there was something wrong with me and my brain, where I lacked the ability to do that without the drugs. Sorry, dry mouth. Um, and it I didn't realize it until I got sober the first time. I was 21, I believe, and when I went to Florida, of course, because that's, like, the place to go for treatment, right? Um, and I went down to West Palm Beach, did my 30 days, and I felt, like, amazing. I was with peers who knew what it felt like to be me for the first time. I had positive support from the adults that were running the treatment center, the therapists, the techs that were on staff. I started going to church when I was down there, and I'm not really a religious person, but I am spiritual. So I enjoyed that, and then I was going to meetings, and I remember walking into AA for the first time, at 21 years old in Florida at this crazy, like, biker AA meeting, and I was just like I got that same feeling that I did for the first time with drugs. I'm home. I'm where I'm supposed to be. This is how life is supposed to feel. I belong. Finally, I feel like I belong. And I had been searching for that all along with drugs and never really found it. Obviously, that's why one is too many and 1,000 is never enough because you're always chasing that first feeling of relief, of release, of stillness, of feeling like you belong. You found your place. You found your place in the world, even if it's just for that moment. So, anyways, I'm like sending letters home. I'm doing great. I'm feeling great. I'm sorry I was such an asshole. I'm sorry I treated you guys like crap. La la la. All this stuff for a new beginner, like, getting sober. Um, Thinking that you're cured. And I mean, I wish that was the case for me, but it wasn't my story. So I went home and then unfortunately going back into the same family dynamic of toxicity and their own sicknesses that they had going on. It didn't last very long. It didn't last very long, which is why I've talked about how important having family involved in the treatment of their loved one who's struggling with addiction. It's just vital because the family as a system, we all are interconnected. We're all impacting each other and things we do and things we don't do. So you might not realize it in the moment, but what you're saying and doing or not saying and doing, could be affecting someone else in the family in a way that is not healthy, I guess, or positive or supportive, whether you mean it to be taken that way or not. Um, so I learned very quickly that I guess in that moment, I didn't know how important it was to have that proper type of support. And I really, for a long time, just kept being like, it's what is wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Or, even though I knew my family had issues And I didn't necessarily blame them, but I definitely wasn't the type that took my trauma and put it on myself. I was never the type of child who was like, "Oh, you're such a bad kid. That's why this is happening." I knew that wasn't the case to a certain degree. I knew I wasn't a bad person. I knew I had more potential and that something was wrong within the family as a whole, and it wasn't me. I wasn't the problem. Um, and I'm grateful for that point of view because I think that has helped me to heal and continue healing from my trauma and to have gotten thus far in my recovery. It might have taken me, years and years, almost my whole existence of life. But I think I've seen this with clients that I've worked with who struggle to get better and to heal and to recover because they have such guilt and shame over the trauma. They blame themselves for a lot of it. And I just was not that type of person. I knew I didn't deserve the things that were happening to me. I knew it wasn't right. It wasn't wrong. I didn't know why or anything like that. I couldn't explain it. I just knew how I was being treated was not appropriate and that I didn't deserve it. But then the problem is that I would get pissed because I would sit there in my room, as a child and adolescent and just why do I receive this treatment? Why is this happening to me? Because I know I don't deserve it. I know I'm a good person. I haven't done anything wrong to deserve this. So why? And I think having that type of insight is its whole other problem. It causes a whole other issue versus somebody that's blaming themselves. I guess it's both. I mean, on one hand, it's a good thing that I wasn't blaming myself, but on the other hand, it's just as maladaptive in a way as somebody who is blaming themselves for their trauma because it kept me in a really angry place for a long time towards not myself, but towards my family and towards just the world in general. Um, but I digress. So, um, where was I? Going back to the scene and her functioning, that's I can relate. I can relate heavy on that. And I know um again that I had built this narrative in my head that I wouldn't be able to function without the substances because I wasn't capable of handling really difficult things in life. I got that core belief from my family, and I got it from, I don't know, just failed attempts of trying to live a normal, quote unquote, life that I saw others around me doing with no problem and just question what was wrong with me. So I thought that was my true self until, I did get a taste of it in that first treatment center. And I really believe that that showed, I was shown that I was good enough and that I was a good person and that I was capable of doing things. But then when you go back into an environment where you're inadvertently told or indirectly you perceive this as or you take things as being told that you're not capable of doing anything and that that helplessness, all those negative feelings come back and then it's once you lose that hope, once you lose that self-efficacy and autonomy, it's like back to that self-loathing, woe is me, I can't do this, no one cares about me, so who cares? I might as well get high. And that's what I did. On and off again, went on another whole journey of on and off using treatment centers, psychiatric hospitals, IOPs, outpatient therapy, Anything you could really think of, Suboxone, methadone, all this stuff, up until I was, 10 years later at 31. And God willing, I'm coming up on 5 years, March 5th. And I can't even believe how far I've come in just 5 years. It's amazing. So watching the show right now is really kind of emotional for me because it's showing me where I came from, and I'm getting to see and compare, like, how I felt as a child, how I felt as an adolescent, where my addiction really truly began, to now, and it's just incredible, and I'm extremely grateful, and I know that at any moment that could be taken because it could, happen like that, um, and I'm off and running. So, always being vigilant about my recovery and being clean is vital, um, but the show is making me feel like I'm not alone, and that what I went through during those stages of my life for someone who struggles with addiction was normal, and that there were other people like me. Because whoever wrote the show has to either be in recovery and they've gone through it, or they know people, so they're taking stories from, like, what they've heard or what they've experienced themselves. So therefore, clearly that means to me, I'm not alone. Like, there's other people who, like, went through that, and, like, yes, you hear about it in the meetings, and you hear people share their stories and their emotions and all of that, and you can relate, but this is just, I don't know, it's hitting me in a different level. So, yeah, and then the part in the scene where she states that, she doesn't know if this is going to kill her. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Um, and for me, that's how I felt. You never knew, no matter how careful you were, as careful as you could be while you're using and kind of be living that reckless lifestyle, you don't know if it's gonna be the next time you pick up that's your time, and, I was just extremely lucky, honestly, and not even just luck, I believe, my higher power and my spirit guides and whoever else, my angels up there were really looking out for me. For whatever reason, I'm still here, and that's why, part of why I'm doing this podcast to give back, and spread the word, spread some education, spread some, uh, love and compassion and empathy, and share my story so others who are out there might be able to relate too. And I know now, even I'm not exempt. No matter how far away from a drug or drink I have, it could happen. Um, but in that moment when you're using, you're so desperate to just not feel. You're so desperate to quiet your mind, to shut everything down. Just like in that first scene, she says, those 2 seconds, you're always, always chasing just those few seconds of peace and serenity. And, now I've had to learn other ways to get those things. I've had to learn what other things bring me not, exactly to that level as a drug will, because obviously that's drugs are, synthetic chemicals put together, these that create this high, and so nothing will probably ever compare to an actual drug. However, taking good care of myself and doing the things that I loved back when I was younger that I had to stop using, or that I stopped using due to my using, like, that stuff brings me close to that point. Making friends with people who are not struggling, like, who aren't addicts or those who are in recovery, those people, those relationships are very meaningful to me, and those enrich my life, and to me, that gets me very close to the high that I would feel on a substance. Um, and my like wife and my relationship with her, and knowing that there's someone who truly loves me for me and I love her for her, and just having that deep, not only romantic connection, but best friend connection, and feeling heard, feeling seen, feeling loved unconditionally. It that gets me close to as high as a drug does. And yeah, I guess just every time I reach for a goal and I obtain it, and I push myself harder to reach another goal and I obtain it, it's like those things give me a high. Like it's like a rush, a natural rush of like, man, you did that. Like you came from shooting heroin to this. It's insane to me. I've only got this semester and summer semester left in my master's, and I just can't even believe it's flown by. I've busted my butt, mind you, but I would have never been able to do that if I was using, or if I was dead. So I'm just, again, very grateful, and I hope someone out there got something from this today. Um, and even if not, I appreciate you taking the time to tune in and listen. And yeah, all the blessings to everybody out there. And be safe, take care of yourself. And until next time.